All right, guys, today I've got a vintage repair for you. This is a side project I've got that I don't nearly get enough time to work on. But it's got a problem where it's leaking ATF where the speedometer cable comes in to the rear extension. Now, this particular transmission is a 1957 Turboglide automatic, but the problem I'm going to be talking about is also one that happens with the 1957, probably 56 up as well, Powerglides. And these actually, even though we're talking about a 57 here in particular, this would have been true for 58, 59, 60, 61 until this part got replaced that we're going to show. So I've got some, stained paper towels down here where this has been leaking. I'm going to go ahead and put ourselves a little catch pan down here when we take this off to do the replacement. But here's a little bit of theory on what's going on. So this is out of the 1957 service manual. And it's just a good picture where they have the Turboglide section, although it certainly, like I said, applies to the Powerglide as well. But you got a situation here where the ATF is in the converter, and then you've got the amount of ATF that's sitting in the pan. And when it sits, it's natural with the technology of the day for this to drain back into the pan, and you'll end up with the fluid going above full. Well, if this sits long enough, because this whole design on both these transmissions in this era intended for them to be driven at some level of frequency. If it sits for a few months or so, you'll get this rising up enough where it creeps into the rear extension and then it leaks out of here. Now, they later fixed this, and what we're going to do is basically do that upgrade. I normally don't like to change the factory parts. This is an all original deal here. I'm going to use some nylon type pliers just to kind of loosen this guy. And we take this off, I'll show you. Well, I thought I had him enough. I'll show you what the problem is. So the speedometer cable just comes off like this. It's all, you can see it's all covered with red ATF fluid. This is a old school type A transmission fluid. And then this piece we're going to be looking at is held in by a single bolt. It's either a 7/16 old school style, or you can also get a large flathead screwdriver in here. And we don't even really have to take it all the way off. We just have to get this little retainer out. And then there's this piece, this fitting. It's like it's going to look like a bullet when we take it out. And there you see we got our transmission fluid just running out. So what's happened here is it's come up above the pan and gotten up to this point enough to drain through there. So we'll take our transmission gear out of the way here. Just set this down out the side. And so this is the piece you had in 1957, 56, 50, 58, 59, 60. There's just a single O-ring here to protect it from leaking. But what ends up happening is the fluid ends up creeping in through where the speedometer gear was mounted. Right? And this guy's got some circular threads on here. And as he spins around, ends up pumping the fluid out into this section here. Now, normally that wouldn't matter because you got a pump that's sucking all this back out. But that same amount of fluid that gets sitting in here ends up starting a little suction of what's sitting in the extension, and this drips it right out through these threads. So what can you do to fix this? Well, what you can do is later on GM realized this problem, and they did correct it. And I'm going to show a part from the 1960s era that does that. Just give me a minute to get it out of the package here. Because what I've got is I've purchased this as an aftermarket type design, and I'll put a link to this down in the description. Of course, now I've got this ATF all over my hands, and I can't get this little piece of plastic opened. Might have to go grab something to the pliers here. See if we can get this opened up with a pair of pliers. Lack of preparedness. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so what I'm going to show you, though, is this piece here has got a different kind of machining on this fitting. If we can extract it from the packaging. All right. Got it enough to show you what I'm talking about. So the piece here is the same. You can see this stuff is just continuing to drip out here. But up on top, it's very different. What happened is GM went in on the end of these and they machined this out so that they could install a seal. And that seal being there is what prevents the leaks, because that seal will mate up and provide a good leak-proof seal between where the speedometer gear fits in and where the speedometer cable seals on the top. I think I might have one of these seals all by themselves. Yeah, so that's what the seal looks like. They give you a spare one, right, sitting right in there with this O-ring. So there's another O-ring and then there's a seal. So let me go ahead and finish extracting this and we'll come back. All right, so here's the replacement and the original side by side. All right, so you can see externally they're fairly much identical except for the end. So like I said, on the end, this piece has been machined out and then that seal has been installed there. Same O-ring to keep it from leaking past the barrel of this, but main thing we're after is this seal on the inside. So before we reinstall this, I'm going to take a little bit of this clean ATF that's on here and put it on this O-ring. And then I'm going to put this guy back in with this piece facing towards this retainer that we're going to be putting back. And actually, I just realized I forgot to put our gear back on. So inside here, right, so there's a little rubber piece on here. Now the gear is going to have a little bit of resistance going in because of the seal. Right? So again, you know, this is the main thing that's happening is this rubber seal in here is what's going to stop the transmission fluid from getting past this guy. And then I'm going to go over here and loosen this guy up a little bit more. So we can get him retained properly. Hoping I could just slide this up here, but I might not be able to. I'm going to have to take him all the way off. And then we'll torque him down, and we will have this repair done. Just like that. Yeah, this stuff gets on your hands. It's so greasy. Can't even hold the socket here. It's going though. And this little piece of metal held in by this bolt is what's going to push this guy in to where he needs to be. Right? Just like that. Just go ahead and let him work in nice and slow until he seats. And then we're going to torque him up. The service manual back in the day, I'm actually, just to show you the similarity, I'm going to go with the Powerglide section. And so the Powerglide section talks about a new O-ring seal on the speedometer driven gear fitting, which is what we just replaced. And we are reinstalling that back in to the bore, and then we're going to put the retainer in and the cap screw and lock washer, which is what we just tightened up. And we're going to tighten that guy to 3.5 to 5 foot-pounds. And what I usually do when I'm working on these older vehicles is I use an older style torque wrench, so I'm using the same kind of equipment they had back in the day. And so we're just going to run this over to 5 foot-pounds. I know I can't really show you guys up here, but let me set it, and then I'll show you how you read one of these old school guys. Okay, 5 foot-pounds. So basically the deal is here, right, it's just a torsion here. And as you tighten it, the little gauge is going to go over. And you stop at 5 pounds. Old school. Sometimes the best school. And now we'll put this guy back on. Run him into the driven gear. And it's like a square kind of fitting. There he goes. And then this guy just goes on finger tight. Might give them just a little extra snug with some nylon type pliers, like I was showing there before. And again, like down here on the manual, just in case it didn't come through the first time lighting wise, while I tighten this up, you can see what we were talking about here is dealing with this drain back. Very natural. In 1957, they had this drain back. But if it sits for a long time, then it gets up high enough to get into the extension and leak out this point. GM redesigned it, fixed that problem, and basically all we're doing is retrofitting the same thing onto the older models. You can either buy what I did, and like I said, I'll put a link in the bottom of the description. I don't have like a particular part number or anything on this box, but I did pick it up from Classic Transmission Solutions. And again, I'll put a link down in the description for this, or if you're handy with a lathe or you know a machinist who is, you can machine the original one to take that same seal. And I'll put a link down to the description if I can locate it. I can't be sure I can locate it, but if I locate a separate source for that seal, I'll put that down there too. I hope this helps you out with your old classic car and it leaking on the garage floor. The only reason I was willing to put a non-original part on here is, you know, back in the day, you would drive this enough where this wasn't a problem. But nowadays, classic car like this, you wouldn't drive that much, so it's an ongoing problem. And this is a good way to correct that so that it doesn't make a big mess in the garage anymore. If you have a comment on other ways you've dealt with this, or maybe how you've fixed it yourself with machining one of these, go ahead and leave a comment in the bottom. We'd love to hear it. Otherwise, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.